Hello listeners, it's Paul here, one half, actually the better half, but don't tell Jeff, of the Who Corner to Corner podcast. Now this is a very special episode of the podcast in which I'm going to tell you all about Andrew Cartmel's brand new novel, ASHRAM Assassin, which is out now, published by Titan Books. So, whether this is actually the same Titan Books who used to publish the old Doctor Who script books, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I can't say. Feel free to email in and put me right. Now, first, before I get into the review, let me just tell you, I read a lot of books. Probably around, 25, 30 books a year, and I read very, very quickly. This is because at one time, when I literally nothing else to do, I decided to take on a degree course in literature and critical theory, where I read even more books, even more quickly, across a whole bunch of different genres. I learned to write, essays about books and read very quickly. So who says university is a waste of time, eh? Best years of my life. Anyway, as far as genres go, I'll read pretty much everything, except Jane Austen. Actually, I'm not a big fan of Jane. That's because I find her novels actually really, really boring and not worth writing about. But it's all a matter of preference, right? And opinion, which is all any review is really. So regardless of how it's wrapped up in a whole bunch of intellectual language, and no matter how learned the reviewer is, it's essentially just that, preference and opinion, which is what this review is going to be. But yeah, I suppose talking about preferences, actually, I'd probably rather read that, which is William Burroughs' Naked Lunch, which couldn't be more different from Jane Austen's Emma. And I think it's a lot better. Others will disagree, no doubt. Do email in if you want to. As regular listeners will also know, I am a massive sci-fi fan. My favourite books include Dune, this thing. Oh, it's been on the pictures lately. How great was that? Did you love it? I don't know. I thought it's fantastic. Anyway, so yes, Dune is a big one for me, mostly because, as well as being a great story, its main protagonist has a brilliant name, which is Paul. Same name as me. Amazing, isn't it? But other favourites of mine, Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, which is not to be confused with At Childhood's End by Sophie Aldred of Doctor Who fame, who we've interviewed on this very, very podcast. And actually, looking at this, I didn't realise I dug this is Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. For those of you who are just listening, it's really, really brittle. I dare not open the spine of this because it will probably just crumble in my hands. So that is a very treasured possession, and I'm going to treat it very much like a treasure. You can also add in all sorts of other things from that. Peter Hamilton, for example. I love Peter Hamilton. Ian M. Banks, and even Ian Banks, which is the same Ian Banks, just without the M, because that's the kind of contemporary fiction, if you like, the thrillers. But you can add into that a whole bunch of others. Ray Bradbury, there's a classic, Fahrenheit 451, which is brilliant. William Gibson's Neuromancer, which I might come back to. Also, my fave, one of my absolute favourite authors, Philip K. Dick. This is the book on which Blade Runner was based, for those of you who don't know. I suspect most of you do. But also, J.G. Ballard is a big one of mine, actually. This is his first published novel, The Drowned World. And I was quite lucky to meet J.G. Ballard when he was still alive. And because I interviewed him for my dissertation, like the first famous author interview I'd ever done, and he was genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. And it was along with David Cronenberg, who I didn't know was going to be there, but just was. So I also met him as well. So that was good fun. I guess on top of that, I might as well confess that I have tried writing my own stuff, and this is my book, which is probably about 10 years old now. It's called Awake in the Dark. It's not a sci-fi, though there are lots of sci-fi references and things in it. So you can get that from Amazon, and might as well plug it because why not? Nobody else will. So go and get it from Amazon if you want. If you get it on Kindle, it's really, really cheap. It's not a cozy crime novel. To be fair, it should probably come with a trigger warning, so do be cautious as you're reading it. But it's sort of based on my other great love, which is art and art history, because I've also got a degree in that. Yes, I did have a lot of spare time in my 20s. I did also want to do a degree in physics, but I never got around to it. Someone told me, actually my dad, that it was kind of time to stop slacking and go out and earn some actual cash. But, I'll read other stuff as well. And to prove that, here's a copy of one of my Jack Reacher novels. This one features Tom Cruise for some weird reason, probably because Tom Cruise was in a film a while back and only Tom Cruise would think that he resembles Jack Reacher, but it's not a bad film. I kind of like it. Jeff probably loves it because he's a big Tom Cruise fan, as you know. But anyway, enough of all that nonsense. I just wanted to give you kind of background as to what my kind of reading tastes and habits were and all that sort of stuff. If you didn't already know, if you're new to this podcast, for example, if you've been listening to us for ages, you probably know, because this is kind of the background to my approach to ASHRAM Assassin. So, and this, of course, is the whole reason I'm recording this, because we interviewed Andrew Cartmel, who wrote this a little while ago, and I honestly, I love this book so much. And I said to Andrew's publicist, Cabria at Titan Books, who was really, really lovely in sending a couple of copies over and letting us read it before it was published. I said, I'll do a review. And here it is. I'll do a video review on our podcast, and this is it. But you know what? Why not? We've never done it before, so this is the first time we've done it. Anyway, so I've got a big note on my screen. Keep to the point, Paul. So if I drift off, I will keep looking at that. It will kind of flash in front of me, as it's in fact doing now. So anyway, back to ASHRAM Assassin then. So for those of you who do listen regularly to our podcast, I'll wager, put money on it, that you're a Doctor Who fan. So in that case, Andrew Cartmel will need no introduction. However, for those of you who stumbled on this because you typed in ASHRAM Assassin into your search bar, I'll tell you that whilst I was preparing to sponge off the States and begin my venture into student debt, Andrew was the script editor of my favourite TV show, which is Doctor Who. Andrew took on the job in the late 1980s, which was sadly at a time when Doctor Who was being pushed into the BBC's corporate trash can by the then BBC controller of the day, which is Michael Grade. Boo! He had it in for Doctor Who because he wanted to spend money on rubbish daytime soaps and trash TV instead. However, this personal hatred of a long-running British institution by someone who should have been a little bit more professional and forward-thinking in his outlook didn't stop young Andrew Cartmel from pouring his heart and his soul into making Doctor Who great again. The fact is, it always had been great, actually, but Andrew wanted to move it into a new era, despite Michael Grade's belief that it belonged to an older era, which he thought nobody really cared about. So, to that end, alongside writers who he brought in, such as Ian Briggs, there you go, that's Ian Briggs's Curse of Fenric there, and also Mark Platt, who wrote Ghostlight. Oh, wow. Tremendous story, this one, both on TV and in book form. And also Ben Aranovich, who is now a very famous name for writing no less than the Rivers of London series, which is also really, really good. But back then, of course, he was just a dude, and his Doctor Who script was the very first thing he'd really ever written professionally. So Andrew Cartmel, along with these great writers, really did turn Doctor Who around, bringing it up to date, I would argue, with more complex, layered stories, quite often with slightly more mature, definitely relevant topical themes, and on occasion some very, very dark humour. Certainly hadn't lost its campness or any of that sort of stuff, wobbly sets and things, but it did have a slightly more edgy feel to it, and tackled some slightly more serious subjects and really went into character. But so Andrew is one of the key drivers behind that, alongside producer John Nathan Turner and the sort of writers' room that was assembled. But you can find out more about those days by tuning in to our interview with Andrew, which is out round about the same time as this review. So please do check it out. We had a good old time talking to him about all those early days. So anyway, my little thing's flashing again. Back to the point. ASHRAM Assassin. What is it all about? Well, Andrew and his publicist described the book as an escapist, cozy crime novel. It's a good description, because one thing it definitely isn't is a kind of hard-boiled thriller featuring sadistic, twisted serial killers. Take a look at I Am Pilgrim if you want to look at that kind of stuff, or even, what was it? This one, Awake in the Dark by, yours truly. Take a look at that. If you want that sort of hard-boiled thing, Ashram Assassin isn't. It is a lot more kind of cozy. I mean, that's the only word you could describe. I think Andrew described it in our podcast as sort of Sunday tea time crime caper, that kind of thing. It's actually, it's actually in the mould, I thought, of something a bit like Richard Osman's novels. The Thursday Murder Club. These are quite good fun. I did enjoy those a lot. But in my opinion, Ashram Assassin is a lot funnier. It's definitely, I thought, a lot more conservative, and it's definitely, a lot less conservative than the Thursday Murder Book Club, and it's somewhat more disruptive, you might say, or at least the protagonist is quite the force of nature. I'll come back to her in just a moment, but I'm not going to lie, I found Ashram Assassin a cracking good read. It is definitely a real page turner. Andrew's previous books include some Doctor Who titles, and weirdly he never actually wrote for the show himself until it had finished, but then he wrote 3 great novels, which is I'll do them in order actually, starting with the first one, which was this, which is Warhead, which was a lot of fun, I thought. Then it was one of the other, I can't remember which one it was afterwards. I think it was War Child, and then it was Warlock. And Andrew told us on his podcast what the 4th title would have been had he got around to actually writing it. If you want to find out what that is, check out our interview with Andrew. So anyway, there you go. So I wasn't quite sure what to kind of expect. I mean, those novels are very much, Doctor Who novels. They're very much in the style of William Gibson's Neuromancer. So they're very kind of cyberpunky, which was very much the zeitgeist in the early to mid 90s. And I'm a big fan of that sort of stuff. He's also written, since leaving Doctor Who, this one, I'll reach around and grab it, which is the Vinyl Detective. Something's just fallen on the floor, don't worry about that. The Vinyl Detective series, which is massively, massively popular and a lot of fun. If you enjoy the Vinyl Detective, you will be pleased to know that there's a lot in common with the 2 novels. Paperback Sleuth, of which Ashram Assassin is the second in the series, and Vinyl Detective series. I think there's like seven books, eight. I think the 8th one is up and coming. And the Vinyl Detective novels, for those of you who haven't read them, kind of feature an obsessive, nerdy record collector who gets caught up in various crimes across each of the increasingly brilliant books. So Ashram Assassin, as I said, is the second in Andrew's newest range, which has the kind of umbrella title of the Paperback Sleuth. Now, those of you, as I said, who would love the Vinyl Detective, I think you would probably love this one as well. If you haven't read it yet, please do go out and get it. It for one thing, it has a lot in common. So things like the humour, that underworld of nerdy collectors, except we're talking about paperback books instead of records, but there's a lot of similarities. There's that kind of obsessive collector's gene that quite a lot of us have, which comes to the fore, and much hilarity, and not to mention a slight amount of murderous violence ensues in both books because of that. The locations are all very similar. It all happens in the same universe, quotation fingers, as the Vinyl Detective, and some of the Vinyl Detective's characters cross over into the Paperback Sleuth. There's even a cameo by the Vinyl Detective himself in the first Paperback Sleuth novel, which is this one, which is Death in Fine Condition, which is also a really, really good read. In fact, actually, the Paperback Sleuth herself is none other than the sister of one of the Vinyl Detective books regulars, someone who's called Stinky Stammer. He pops up in the first Paperback Sleuth novel at a couple of critical moments, which are all actually really, really funny, and fireworks ensue. And Cordelia, the star of the Paperback Sleuth novels, the Paperback Sleuth herself, she's not a fan of her brother at all, and there's a brilliant moment in the first novel, Death in Fine Condition, where Cordelia hangs her brother Stinky out for bait for a vicious gangster and his gang, just to literally save her own skin, which kind of leads me on to the best part, I suppose, of the Paperback Sleuth series, which is the protagonist, Cordelia Stammer. Like her brother, she's incredibly amoral. She puts herself first in every situation. She's competitive. She has very little empathy for anyone apart from herself. And she tends to think of complete strangers, people she meets for the first time, as usually total losers or wankers or fascists, unless she fancies them, in which case it's very different, very different. And she's also a total thief, as we learn in the first novel. But whereas her brother Stinky is a truly quite nasty piece of work, actually, Cordelia is immediately likable, and I did find myself siding with her on actually pretty much everything. I mean, of course, like all of us, she misjudges people quite often, but at least she's prepared to admit that she might have been wrong about them. You know, once they've kind of earned their true place in her pantheon of, people she kind of likes, then, she's up for it. Yeah, got it wrong. They're not a total wanker at all. They're actually halfway decent. So it's that kind of thing, really. One character of which is her landlord, a kind of posh guy with a lovable dog who she spends much of the first novel avoiding because obviously he needs her to pay rent and she'd rather not pay the rent, and actually in most cases cannot pay the rent, which kind of drives a fair bit of the first novel's plot. But the landlord also has a dog, a very lovable, really well-drawn dog called Rainbow, whose presence in the novel actually, I think, also goes a long way to keeping the amoral Cordelia on the reader's side. So the plot, then, what is it actually about? Because I did ask that question a little while ago. Yeah, keep on topic, Lavelle, keep on topic. The plot of ASHRAM Assassin concerns a theft at a yoga club, or more pretentiously, an ashram, the Silver Light Ashram. That's the name of the yoga club. But it seems somebody broke in one night and stole a pile of books that the ashram was actually very proud of, being that some of them were very rare and very personal to its heritage. The thief also did a naughty toilet in the room from which the books were taken, which provides Cordelia with some very snappy language, some really witty barbs. She has no hesitation firing out at the ashram's somewhat pretentious management. Again, pretentious in her viewpoint. I'll come back to her viewpoint a little bit later. She has names for all of them. They're not their real ones. She tends to give nicknames for a lot of people, and they're mostly quite derogatory. They're not very flattering, for sure. So anyway, cut to the chase. Cordelia is called in to find the stolen books. She's the Paperback Sleuth. See how it works? So many of these books, it turns out, were actually written by the ashram's founder, Avram Silverlight, who's a kind of hippie relic of the 60s and 70s with a somewhat dubious past, who vanished from public view and relinquished association with the yoga centre many, many years ago. So at first, Cordelia is reluctant to get involved. She doesn't want to have anything to do with them. The reason for this is because she was excommunicated. She was banished. She was deterred in the strongest possible terms from ever venturing into the yoga club's hallowed classrooms for life, on account of the fact that she was caught selling weed to other yoga enthusiasts within the colourful borders of its zen-like peace garden. This actually, her being banished from the yoga centre is brilliantly recounted in the first Paperback Sleuth novel, Death in Fine Condition. So yeah, I'll read the first one. It's as much as read the second one, because they're both brilliant. So anyway, at this point, the orange pajamaed fascists, Cordelia's words, not mine, obviously want her to find their missing books, and they're willing to pay good money. So eventually she accepts the gig, charging the ashram an absolute fortune for doing so. But no sooner has Cordelia begun her quest to find the lost books when people associated with the ashram, they start dropping down dead, murdered by violence. Oh yes. Although, as Andrew says in our interview, not the kind of grisly, brutal bloodbaths you find in some Scandi slasher books. The deaths in ASHRAM Assassin are brought about by perhaps somewhat more comedic means, if that's an appropriate term for describing violent murder. I don't know, but we do have things like we have death by whiskey bottle, death by admittedly delicious curry. How do I know the curry described in the book is delicious? Because it is described so well in the book that I really, really hungered for some whenever it was mentioned, and thinking about it now makes me want to just grab some. But anyway, as the novel progresses, Cordelia, the paperback sleuth herself, begins to suspect that these murders are actually far from accidental, and it soon transpires that somebody is out to do for Cordelia too, which leads to some very tense scenes in which she, as the hunter, swiftly becomes the hunted. So the structure of ASHRAM Assassin, it kind of feels quite traditional in that we are introduced through Cordelia's unique lens to a wide menagerie of very vividly drawn characters who, as I said earlier, begin to drop dead. But it's like they're all victims to someone who seems desperate to kind of cover their tracks. But and as per the best Agatha Christie novels, there are plenty of suspects. They're mostly dispatched pretty quickly by various means, and so the identity of the titular ASHRAM assassin had me guessing actually right up to the end of the book, and the reveal was very satisfyingly done as well. I would say that in comparison to the first novel, ASHRAM Assassin actually is possibly the more traditional of the two books. So far, that is, because I gather there'll be another one coming out soon. Please let there be another one coming out. So yeah, I do think it is the more traditional. I mean, certainly for those who are expecting the novel to unfold in a certain way, that kind of structure where as the kind of detective starts to deduce the motive and uncovers various people and their relationships with other and all sorts of things, and various suspects are lined up, and there's kind of red herrings, which and all sorts of things come out, nasty secrets and surprises come out the cupboards, and that is as much fun as actually finding the the identity of the killer itself. So but what I would say is Death in Fine Condition, the first one, that is probably best thought of as an introduction to Cordelia and her world. Her thoughts, her attitudes, her people, her entire universe, actually. I mean, we spend so much time with her in what Andrew calls the close third-person narrative, which is kind of as close as you can get in a novel to to a first-person narrative, but without the use of the singular personal pronoun, the I, if you like. But the thing is, I mean, it's. By the end of ASHRAM Assassin, you kind of, and actually by this one, actually, keep it together, Death in Fine Condition, if you read that one first, it's like, because the narrative voice is so close to Cordelia's own train of thought and words, and uses her language as much as anything. So you kind of feel as a reader that you don't have any choice but to feel like Cordelia intimately, actually very intimately, as it turns out. #Bath Night. Read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So the voice of the author or narrator in both books is very much that of Cordelia. But in Death in Fine Condition, we're quite a way into the novel before we see the first body, which sounds a bizarre thing to kind of read a book in anticipation of, but it is touted as a murder mystery, I suppose, and its prologue, this is Death in Fine Condition, opens with the discovery of a body, a part in the novel that we're going to eventually get to. It's that kind of prologue, but we do spend a long time reading through the novel waiting to get to that moment. Now this, don't get me wrong, this is not a criticism of Death in Fine Condition, by the way, because by the time the time we spend in Cordelia's head leading up to that moment when she discovers the first body is so joyous. I could literally read 1,000 pages describing her travels through daily life without any bodies showing up at all. Still, ASHRAM Assassin, dun, 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 in comparison, this novel cuts to the chase pretty quickly, and as I said, it follows a more traditional kind of murder mystery story structure in that respect. So I'm sure that avid murder mystery readers will probably appreciate that. So all the characters, aside from Cordelia, who inhabit this world, are, again, as I mentioned earlier, incredibly vivid. They are wonderfully drawn. There's a danger here, and I've seen it in plenty of novels, movies, and TV serials, that such characters where they're maybe a little bit kind of OTT and a bit grotesque, perhaps, are kind of veer into the realms of caricature and standard archetypes. However, I must say that all the people in ASHRAM Assassin, despite their various quirks and somewhat bizarre wardrobe choices in some cases, they all feel quite real and relatable. So they all have a kind of history, and they all, as I kind of mentioned earlier, they all have sort of relationships with other people. You feel that they're real, and having lived in this part of London, or certainly gone to school there for quite a few years, I can sort of see these people. They exist. They're real. They're not just fashioned out of wispy thin air or something. So I do like that. The whole caricature archetype thing, it's not the case with Cartmel's cast. These people are much more three-dimensional than any of that, and as a result, you kind of feel for them when a few of them start turning into corpses. That's a polite way of putting it, possibly, but it's a murder mystery. People are going to die in this novel, right? So if you have an issue with that, then don't read the book. So that's the thing about the characters. But of course, in those descriptions and responses to them, and what we're kind of reading, as I said, the author's voice is so close, that close third person. We have to sort of remember that we are seeing these people through Cordelia's very shamelessly egocentric perspectives. So our opinions of those characters are bound to be skewed by her take on them, if you see what I mean. So even though Cordelia boils people down to mere labels, it means we don't have to. This is a good thing about that close third person narrative, because it's not the I said, I saw, I did, it's Cordelia did, Cordelia saw, but it's very, very close. So but that gives us a bit of benefit in that it gives us slightly more info than Cordelia is actually prepared to see. So we can sort of read between the lines, if you like. It's a really, really clever and really brilliantly done method of writing. It's really quite something. It's very good, I have to say. But as I said, like most of the people Cordelia meets, she are immediately classed by her as like inferior. I mean, that's it. She is at the pinnacle. Everyone else is inferior, and they're either losers, fascists, or total wankers, or alluring sex-fueled demigods forever out of reach. And as regards the latter of those, there is one particular character who has travelled straight across from the pages of the Vinyl Detectives. So if you read those books, you will recognise who that is, and it's quite interesting to see her through Cordelia's eyes. I mean, Cordelia lusts after her with an almost tyrannical kind of ambition. I won't tell you who it is, except to say that her fleeting presence in the first Paperback Sleuth novel, there it is, it actually powers much of Cordelia's motivation. She also, very briefly, appears in ASHRAM Assassin at a couple of critical junctures. In fact, just the last word on characters in here, I suppose, it's worthwhile mentioning that everyone in ASHRAM Assassin has a role to play. They all affect the plot in some way, even those who hover right on the very edge of the story. Even Lipstick Teeth, who's the gatekeeping Cerberus of a charity shop in Putney High Street. Bizarrely, it's a place where I used to go after school hours to buy more books, mostly Doctor Who books, actually. It was a W.H. Smith's back in the day. Don't know if that's still there. If you know, let me know, because I haven't been back to Putney for quite a while, which is another thing, because it was quite nice sort of reading these books and going back to the streets of Barnes, Putney, kind of Fulham, and in the Vinyl Detective, sort of Hammersmith and all of those kind of areas. I love all that. So it was had a kind of weird nostalgic vibe for me in a lot of ways. So Cartmel's portrayal of the underworld of paperback book collectors, it's extraordinarily vivid. It's utterly believable. It's a world filled with untrustworthy allies and even more untrustworthy nemesis. People such as the Mole, who is just hilarious. We all know somebody like the Mole, just kind of wanders around in the very inappropriate kind of backpack. And he's the guy who is another book collector, and he always seems to get in front of Cordelia at all of kind of various book fairs and sales, snapping up all the valuable titles, annoying her like you wouldn't believe. And on that subject as well, actually, both ASHRAM Assassin and Death in Fine Condition are kind of layered, I guess, as you would probably expect, with a lot of information on rare book titles, some of which are real, some of which aren't real. But I think it's worth pointing out that, as with the entries on rare records, there it is in the Vinyl Detective. These, it's, and stuff like that. It's like those passages never actually feel forced, if you know what I mean. It's like, there's a lot of it that I personally genuinely find quite interesting. So, it's like reading the Vinyl Detective. It caused me to find new music. And the Paperback Sleuth has me looking out for crime novels, right? So, plus, anyway, I kind of like the whole merging of truth with fiction. Why? I even did it myself, in my own world when describing the underworld of art and everything that kind of goes with it. So, I kind of get that, and I can see what Andrew's doing, and I do enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Andrew, back to Andrew Cartmel, this is, colours both these novels, Getting the Right Way Up, Paul, Death in Fine Condition, and ASHRAM Assassin, the new one. Colours them both with descriptions of, things like paperback cover art, publication history, and the sort of snobbishness, I guess, elitism that goes hand in hand with all of that. And it all feels too real. Cordelia will literally destroy anyone who gets between her and a certain title of a certain year with a certain cover by a certain forgotten artist or something, but she couldn't give a toss for the same title in a different cover, for example. And I know this to be true. In this kind of psychology, it is true, because I have experienced it myself from my own kind of irregular hunts for certain Doctor Who books, with certain covers, for example, some of which are rarer, more valuable, and more kind of covetable than others, So and sometimes it's not actually just for the sake of how much the book is worth. It's just for the kind of bragging rights online. Look what I got! It's very rare edition of Lung Barrow or something, which is now sort of fetching like £500 a go or something like that. I should have asked Andrew, actually, thinking about it, if he was ever going to feature another Paperback Sleuth with Cordelia looking for Lung Barrow. It's for those of you who don't know, it's a Doctor Who novel published by Virgin Adventures in the 90s, written by Mark Platt, again, who wrote The Ghostlight, and it's rare as hen's teeth. It's somehow just accumulated value and possessibility, and it's kind of crazy how these things happen, but anyway, there it is. And I've got the little flashy thing coming up again saying stay on target. So what was I talking about? Yes, so the whole kind of looking for the cover art and the books and titles and stuff like that. So yes, I get that. And I guess actually, just to kind of add this in, I did find myself Googling various titles, covers, and the artists being described, just to see what they look like. So it gives you kind of visual reference. Andrew describes them all pretty well in the book, especially when you do then look at the visual reference. You think, oh yeah, that's pretty much what he described. It's quite good. It's good writing. But there were times when Google failed me because it was something Cartmel had made up. Hey, you cheeky rascal. But it's a lot of fun nonetheless. And the whole kind of reading a novel, then going on Google, kind of search it and find out a little bit more depth about things like that. It gives, for me anyway, it's a lot of fun, and it gives a novel a kind of added dimension. And I guess actually, I just realised, probably because I'm holding up both these books, and I'm holding up the Vinyl Detective as well as loads of other things as well, but it does strike me I'm kind of talking about the first and the second Paperback Sleuth novels in probably and the Vinyl Detective in probably about equal quantities actually, but it's fine because I do view ASHRAM Assassin as a kind of welcome addition to the first book. It's it kind of picks up after a little while after the first one kind of left off, and of course, as I said, it all happens in the same universe as the Vinyl Detective. So I guess that kind of begs the question, do you need to read any of the others, i.e. Vinyl Detective? Do you need to read all 7 books of these? Or do you need to read the first novel in the Paperback Sleuth series, Death in Fine Condition, before you get onto the new one, ASHRAM Assassin? Well, I don't think you do. I'd say no, because Ashram Assassin, it's a complete novel in itself. Yes, there are references, there are links to the other books, but they're kind of minor, really, and they don't affect the plot of Ashram at all. It's probably more the case that if you start with ASHRAM Assassin, the latest book, and you enjoy it, then you'll probably want to go back and read, the Vinyl Detective, or the first novel in the Paperback Sleuth series, Death in Fine Condition. So yeah, you probably just want to go out and read all the others too. So. But then thinking about that, actually, just as I'm saying it and trying not to contradict myself, I think it's a good idea if you do read Death in Fine Condition before you read Ashram Assassin, because for nothing else, there's a brilliant revelation which starts one of the chapters. Should have made note of it. I think it's like chapter 13 or something like that, and it's a little bit later than that. But I'm not going to spoil it, so I'm not going to say it. But it's a brilliant revelation concerning a character who pops up in both novels, and that if you read Ashram first, you'd know that, so it wouldn't be so much impact if you then went back and read Death in Fine Condition. So I don't know if that makes any kind of sense at all. But if nothing else, Death in Fine Condition, I would say actually yes, do read it first, because if nothing else, it is just such a wonderful, brilliant introduction to the mind and the workings of the mind of Cordelia Stanmer. It kind of shows how and why she became the Paperback Sleuth, and yeah, there's that brilliant revelation regarding one of the major characters in both as well. So yeah. Plus, also, Death in Fine Condition gives you that backstory on her being booted out of the yoga center. So I mean, to be fair, you do get that in Ashram Assassin as well. So it's kind of recounted here just as brilliantly. So again, it's like I said, it's all sort of complete. You don't have to, but I would recommend that you do read the first one first, I guess. And to be fair, actually, let's go out and buy both of them, because I'm sure that neither Andrew nor his publishers would mind if you went out and bought both books in one hit and read them in order. So yeah, and I think, again, my little flashy thing's coming up now, so I'm going to wind this up. I guess to sum up then, to summarise, I would say if you love murder mysteries, you will love this Ashram Assassin. It's if you love disruptive, rebellious humour, if you love having a character who's a totally amoral, dog-loving, ego-driven, yet infinitely likeable obsessive who places herself at the pinnacle of humanity, you'll also love it. And if you enjoyed Richard Osman's Thursday Night Book Club books, I think you'll enjoy Ashram Assassin more. I guarantee it, you will, actually. And if you don't, well, that's on you. It's nothing to do with me. See the small print. Finally, I would say if you're a Doctor Who fan and you just want more Andrew Cartmel, then what are you waiting for? You don't need me to tell you how good a writer is. We all know that speech at the end of Survival, right? So, yes, do I rate it? Of course I do. Absolutely. How highly do I rate Ashram Assassin? I rate it very highly. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 cups of tea. And that's only because I know the next book in the series will be even better. It's the closest thing to a 5-star review that I would ever give, but it's brilliant. If you don't believe me, I don't care. Go buy it and see for yourself. Or if you're listening or watching this before the 31st of July 2024, you can enter our competition to win a copy of Ashram Assassin for yourself. Oh, how exciting is that? If you're listening and watching this after July 31st, it's too late. Tough. You can't. The competition's closed, so you'll have to go out and buy your own copy. However, you will not regret it because it's brilliant. So there you go. Ashram Assassin, out now by Andrew Cartmel, published by the wonderful people at Titan Books. Please do check it out. And before I go, don't forget to listen to our interview with Andrew himself for more on Ashram Assassin and Death in Fine Condition and the Vinyl Detective series. And, as if that that wasn't enough, all the background and inside info on Andrew's time on the greatest show in the galaxy, which is, of course, Doctor Who. Anyway, I will be back. Thank you for listening to this. I will be back with my co-host Jeff in the next of our regular podcasts. And if you're new to us, if you just stumbled across us, hi, hello, please do check us out. We're called Who Corner to Corner, and literally all we do is talk Doctor Who. We're on all major podcasting platforms, and we release episodes literally every week. Sometimes it's just the two of us, but we also have brilliant guests on as well, such as Andrew Cartmel, but also people like Colin Baker, Sophie Aldred, Joe Martin, Ray Holman, loads and loads of other people, and yeah, many more legends from the world of Doctor Who. So yes, good to meet you, and hope you enjoyed this little book review. Please do go out and buy it, do get it, or enter our competition if there's still time. You can win a free one yourself. Anyway, that's enough talking from me. Until next time, take care and ta-ta for now. Bye.